So I'm actually going on this inaugural flight from Singapore to Hong Kong. Got to tell you, there's a lot of paperwork and testing involved. It's not your regular pre-pandemic trip, so to speak. And of course, both cities will be watching to see if there's a spike in unlinked coronavirus cases. In your view, are travel bubbles going to work?
I don't think so. I don't think it's going to make a dent in helping the balance sheet of both airlines concerned. I think travel bubbles are good because it improves the morale of the workers. It gives some semblance of hope for people very keen on traveling. But at the end of the day, I think it's very, very severe still out there. And I think we will see increasingly that more people are unlikely to be tempted to fly to Hong Kong or to Singapore because many fear still the rampant disease going about, and even with the vaccine being announced, I think we're some way yet before we achieve, the arrival of the vaccine. And so people are very much skeptical. And with all the health measures that people like yourself have had to go through, I think it puts people off from traveling.
Yeah, I'm not looking forward to that 4-hour wait for my result in Hong Kong, got to say that. Let's talk, though, about what the vaccine means for airlines, though, because when we look at this travel bubble in particular, it's being run by the big guns, the likes of Cathay Pacific and Singapore Air. If there is not a vaccine on the timeline we're all hoping for, what happens to a lot of the smaller airlines?
They're going to go bust, unfortunately. And I think we're seeing that already. We've seen AirAsia Japan, we've seen Cathay Dragon, and just a few days ago, Norwegian also filed. So my view is that with 2001, the first quarter definitely will likely to see quite a number of casualties amongst airlines, not just the small ones, but also the major ones, because the cash reserves are depleted. And, we're not going to be anywhere near a vaccine anytime soon. And indeed, in this part of the world, we'll probably see it a lot later than people in the US or in Europe. So that said, I think the industry is still going to undergo very severe turbulence, and I think jobs will be losses. We'll still continue to see losses. In fact, I think it's going to be a lot worse than what we've seen this year.
Shukor, so the long-distance or long-haul low-cost model, according to you, is probably going to go by the wayside here. That's one aspect. But are the beneficiaries there the legacy carriers, or are they the low-cost carriers for short-haul routes?
I think the beneficiaries would be those carriers that has got aircraft, narrow-body aircraft, instead of wide-body aircraft that can fly a long range. For example, the Airbus A321XLR, which is probably one of the best narrow-body aircraft you can get today. And that would help even legacy carriers, if they were to get them, to fly further than they have been before. Now, for legacy carriers with fuel-guzzling 777s or A350s, or even A380s that some of them still have, then they're not going to be able to reap any sort of benefit. In fact, each time they fly, I think they're going to make a loss. So that deters airlines from flying intercontinental again because of social distancing, and also because border restrictions have not been fully lifted, and it varies from country to country. So there's a lot of restrictions, a lot of negatives yet, and we're probably not going to see any amendments to that for the next 6 months.
Shukor, also, in the aviation space, the 737 MAX 20-month grounding coming to an end, but the damage is already done, isn't it? What sort of reputational damage is Boeing likely to have suffered? Will these aircraft be taken to the skies anytime soon? Will some of them find homes that they were destined for originally?
Very good question. I think after the 20-month grounding, the appetite for the MAX, as we've seen, is clearly a lot less than they were pre-COVID. Now, whether or not they'll find homes is debatable. My guess is many of them won't find homes. I spoke to Boeing about a week ago, and they briefed us on what's happening to the run-up to the approval by the FAA, and they're saying that there are actually now over 700 Maxes on the ground, and these will have to struggle to find a way. There will be airlines that won't be needing them anymore now. There'll be airlines that won't be able to afford them now. So what's going to happen? So that's a huge question, and that's likely going to have quite a big impact on Boeing. But that said, I mean, the aircraft is still very much a very good aircraft. I think there's a lot going for it. If it's used, according to the economics of some carriers in Southeast Asia especially, so there's room for that. But for it to see a full startup again, I think it's going to be very, very extremely challenging.
There's probably passenger fear a little too there about some safety. But Shukor, you're sounding, I guess, a little bit negative overall in terms of, I know we're facing a lot of headwinds here too, but when do we see travel kind of get back to pre-pandemic levels, and do we?
I have no doubt that travel will return. I think, the airline industry has always been very, very resilient. Airlines have been very resilient, but this year has just been it's a diabolical one, and I think it's very different from what we've seen before. And so the recovery will be very gradual, very incremental, and only the strong ones like Singapore Airlines, like British Airways are going to make it through. But even then, only just. And the smaller ones, the weaker ones, the ones that are not very well capitalized or with very poor management, I think those will either be left behind, will die, or irrespective of what happens in the future. But only if governments are willing to infuse or inject money to see them surviving or to sustain those. But then it's not a very worthwhile cause to put up an airline that's already on the brink of collapse or being not being well managed. I think as far as funds are concerned, I think very few airlines have dry powder. I mean, there's not many airlines with very deep reserves with a lot of money. Very few of them in the Middle East. In Singapore is one example. But at the end of the day, I think we're still going to see a lot more suffering, in my view, next year, because there's a lot of lagging that's going to take place, and we're only seeing the beginning of the collapse.
Shukor, very quickly here, it's Friday, the weekend is nearly upon us. Please give us some good news or something you're getting excited about.
I think that we should be excited about the prospect of the vaccine helping us beyond the second half of next year, hopefully. I think we should be excited that there are still airlines like SIA, like Emirates, that still have the wherewithal, that have still got good management. And then, there's consolidation that's just taken place in Korea between Korean Air and Asiana. So those are among those little things that we look forward to in the next 6 months of 2021. But apart from that, unfortunately, I think people will still have to hunker down at home until such time when the situation calms down and we're ready to come out and play again.